When we are children, we seldom think of the future. This innocence leaves us free to enjoy ourselves as few adults can. The day we fret about the future is the day we leave our childhood behind. Trauma within Berserk spawns from every dark, maleficent crevice that inhabits the vile landscape of the universe, be it physical, emotional, or sexual violence, eldritch horror beyond comprehension, domestic struggles, warring environments, and many more. One theme that Kentaro Miura continuously plucks the string of is the lasting effects of childhood trauma, a central resonating issue with many of the characters including Guts, Griffith, Casca, Farnese and Jill, along with others I shall discuss later on, often shapes them, moulding them into the lives they end up leading and the convictions they end up carrying. Now, obviously we all know Guts' childhood very well. Being born by a falling out of a hanging corpse is never the best beginning, and his life only persisted to get worse as he grew, forced to fight on the battlefield as a child, killing and suffering the harsh conditions of warfare. On top of this, he was emotionally abused and verbally assaulted by the only father figure he had in Gambino, and sold out to Donovan to be sexually molested. Guts eventually kills both Donovan and Gambino, however the past haunts him for years to come, appearing in his nightmares alongside his first consensual sexual experience with Casca, the trauma overwhelming his mind and ending up harming the woman he loves. Following this moment between Guts and Casca, the horrors of his past take a definite back seat, as the fresh trauma occurring in the eclipse takes the primary role in the next stage of Guts' character. However, the Golden Age certainly portrays the horrendous consequences of neglect and abuse that can cause someone to change, become antisocial, and suffer torturous visions and nightmares. Childhood trauma is so devastating to one's development due to how rapidly the brain is growing, and therefore discourse interrupting this natural progression can be truly stunting for a child in their formative years. Depending on one's resilience, this can alter how well one deals with trauma. Guts, for example, maxed his stats out on endurance, and therefore deals with a lot more than perhaps others could. And whilst Berserk doesn't really focus on the medical side of childhood trauma, such as disruption of certain hormonal flows and autoimmune disorders, along with chronic illnesses, Miura does highlight the other aspects such as social struggles and cognitive discernment. Griffith's unfurling ambition can be accredited to his childhood circumstances, living in constant poverty in the dirty back alleys of the kingdom. Whilst his childhood is not extensively portrayed within the manga, we do know his obsession for a castle began due to him so desperately wanting to escape the life he was in. Simultaneously, however, this background of Griffith's could also be seen as a positive attribute to his win at all costs mindset, as his stripping of any elongated comfort in his childhood not only showed him the rawness of the world, but also acted as a constant memory of what he never wishes to return to. His task, however, is simply impossible to achieve. Guts says himself that Griffith will continue moving forwards, always clutching at his obsessive ambition with no real end in sight. As a human, Griffith was cold to those he deemed opposition and enchantingly charismatic to those he deemed allies, but all of them served one purpose: him. Friend or foe, Griffith had not developed love in his heart, perhaps due to the neglect of his childhood, or simply his family could not afford love. Casca experienced a similar level of poverty, potentially worse in fact, as she lived in a little village tucked in a mountain pass and often experienced raiders and bandits due to them being near a war front. However, when a passing noble saw her, he convinced her father to sell Casca to fill him the role of a maid at a housing estate. This was clearly not the intention the noble had though, and immediately attempted to assault Casca. She managed to escape initially, but was eventually pinned down and stripped, only to be saved by a mystical grace named Griffith. Casca ended up killing the noble without being sure if he had fallen onto the blade himself. In the following moments, Casca committed to serving Griffith and learning the blade to help assist the man she now worshipped like a god. The common theme between Guts, Casca and Griffith is that violence brought them together, and violence became their way of life, simply due to the differing hands they were dealt. Overall though, a traumatic upbringing brought them together, sharing related struggles, and therefore offered a catharsis for some time at least before Griffith sacrificed them all. The Lost Children chapter is an incredibly memorable mini-chapter in the Conviction arc due to its visceral morbidity surrounding neglect, trauma, and violence, mainly involving children. It drives the impression that Miura was either unbelievably empathetic to children's struggles, or the more likely case is that his own work depicts horrors that occurred in his own childhood. Jill is a child living in the village that befriends Guts on arrival, unknowingly relating with the Black Swordsman with traumatic pasts. Her father is a drunk abuser living off his glory days in the military, constantly abusing Jill and her mother, showing no affection and care. Her mother conforms to expected societal roles and for this reason does not rise up against Zepek, accepting the abuse and silent suffering. It is strongly implied that Jill has suffered sexual abuse from Zepek's equally drunk friends, as she is seen trembling terrified when she sees one approaching her. This is confirmed to be true later on in a brief flashback of her being harassed when she was younger. Once again, Berserk is not afraid to depict sexual violence towards children, reminding us once more of the disgusting world we are viewing. One of the more horrifying moments in the Lost Children chapter occurs when Jill and Puck stumble upon a herd of the demon elves playing, or so they think. Whilst it seems fun at first, a shocking twist with no warning turns the wholesome scene into a bloody battlefield. The horrors increased knowing all of them are really children at heart. The visuals are incredibly sharp, blood spray, dark shadows, contorted corpses, which cast us back to the eclipse, and potentially the most horrendous part, the adult attack, which weirdly enough some people didn't realize what it was until a second reading, but I digress. Children find this form of entertainment normal, as it is the way adults act, ultimately showing the evil nature of humans in this world, as our violent ideologies and sinful actions pass from generation to generation, as shown through this brutal display. Rosine explains to Jill that human villages are full of conflict, abuse, and danger for young human children, and that embracing the life she can give with this pseudo-apostle transformation will allow Jill to escape. Rosine herself is an incredibly unique antagonist in Berserk, as the line blurs on our loyalties to Guts due to the nature of her being. She is simply a young girl. We see her backstory came from no malice, no lust for power, just a wish to escape the abusive childhood she suffered. Her father resented her due to suspecting she was not his own child, a bastard born from her mother's sexual assault from men who raided their village. Rosine wanted to escape this life, to find the elves she had obsessed over, and sacrificed her parents to achieve this. However unknowingly it would have been. Even though she has committed atrocities since her transformation, such as slaughtering people and abducting children, we still find sympathy for her after the main fight with Guts, as she really was just a child beaten by the world. Her childhood, much like Jill, Guts, Casca, Griffith, and more, was stripped of innocence from early on, and fate ordained her descent into hatred of humanity via transformation, but in her final moments, falling from the starry night sky, we see her thoughts consist of a family and how playtime was finally over. Jill is left somewhat traumatized by events and continues to run away from her abusive father, finding Guts once more. She has the same mentality as Rosine even now, wanting nothing more than to escape the world she inhabits, but Guts shows her the horrors that follow him, providing uncharacteristic sympathy towards the young girl, perhaps seeing himself within her, shrouding her with his cloak as he delivers the harsh truth that this world possesses no paradise. He vanishes, leaving Jill to come to the conclusion she must fight her own battles and carve her own purpose from the poor hand she has been dealt, ending in a surprisingly hopeful way. The Lost Children chapter is heavily focused on the loss of innocence, but also the need to keep fighting, for if we do not fight, we cannot win. Tatake or something. Two more characters who experienced desolate childhoods were Farnese and Serpico. Serpico lived in poverty with an illness-crazed mother obsessed her son was of royal blood, forcing her delusions onto Serpico. He is often beaten up and forced to care for his sickly mother, whose back strongly resembles that of a tortured Griffith. Years later, to prove his commitment to Farnese, he sets ablaze his own mother, killing her for a heretic. Earlier on, however, he is saved by Farnese, who also experiences neglect for other reasons. Her royal family do not value her as much as they should have, showering her in commodities to dampen the fact they were not there for her, wrapped up in their responsibilities of so much power. Farnese developed psychopathic tendencies, perhaps due to her neglect, her social skills severely flawed, leading her to strange impulses, such as burning and crying out in her confusion. Serpico observes she is lonely and terrified of being abandoned, as she already feels from her parents. Neglect often leads children down darker routes, should that be drug abuse, unhealthy, abusive relationships later on, and rolling around with the wrong crowds. The two children bond over their shared loneliness. Eventually, Farnese develops strange incestuous feelings for Serpico, albeit unknown, taking pleasure in drawing blood from him. She ends up burning down the mansion, her crazy impulses landing her in a monastery to fix her. Farnese's tragic childhood shows that parents can be misunderstanding of their children simply due to them not taking the time or effort to form meaningful connections, and this can lead to the child developing ill habits with no actual guidance from the ones they need. Overall, Berserk shows us many different forms of coping with one's trauma, should that be inflicting pain upon others or loathing oneself, and thankfully shows trauma can occur from literally any domestic situation, regardless of the wealth they possess. Money does not buy warmth, and Amira ultimately perpetuates the need for real human connection to make a child feel safe. This is best shown through the relation of Flora and Shirke, where a real sense of family can be found, making Flora's departure ever more saddening. In a story that focuses so much on the process of a human, childhood trauma is vital to discuss, and Miura does an excellent job at this, fusing realism with the supernatural. Anyways guys, that's all for today. If you liked it, be sure to subscribe, trying to hit 500 before the end of summer, and join my server through the links provided in my about section for any discussions or anything you want. That's all from me. Peace out.